It all started on a Saturday night. Emily said she was going out with her friends, just a little girl's night to blow off steam. At first, I did not think much of it. She had been stressed with work, and I figured some time away might help her clear her head. But when midnight came and went, I started to worry. By 1 a.m., I was pacing the living room, checking my phone every few minutes for a message, a missed call, anything. Nothing. The house was so quiet that the ticking of the clock felt like a hammer inside my head. I kept glancing at the door, hoping to hear the click of her key in the lock. I told myself she was just having fun and probably lost track of time. But deep down, my gut was starting to churn. Something did not feel right. By 2:30 a.m., I could not take it anymore. I texted her, "Emily, where are you? Are you okay?" No reply. My mind began to race, imagining all sorts of scenarios. Was she in trouble? Was she hurt? I picked up my phone to call her. Straight to voicemail. That sinking feeling in my stomach started to take over. You know that dread when you feel something is terribly wrong, but you are afraid to confront it because you know once you admit it, everything changes? That was me. At 3 a.m., I shot her another text. "Emily, answer your phone. I am getting worried." Left on read. The night dragged on, and with each passing hour, the worry turned into anger. I was not just concerned anymore. I was furious. How could she think it was okay to stay out all night without so much as a word? I sat there, stewing, imagining every possible explanation. None of them were good. By the time 4 a.m. hit, I was beyond furious. Emily's silence felt like a slap in the face. She had gone out in her tight black dress. The one she knew drove me crazy, and all I could think about was where she was, or worse, who she was with. My thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. I grabbed my car keys and stormed out of the house. Sitting around in silence was unbearable. I drove aimlessly for a while, unsure where I was even going, but needing to move, to do something. I called my buddy Ryan. He lived near the bar where Emily had said she and her friends were going, so I thought maybe he had seen her. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Have you seen Emily tonight? She hasn't come home, and I'm starting to worry." There was a long pause. I could hear him shifting around, like he was trying to think of what to say. Finally, he replied, "Nah, dude, I haven't seen her. I thought she was with you." That was it. That was the moment my gut told me everything I had been trying to avoid. Emily was not where she said she would be. There was no way to sugarcoat it. Something was going on. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The betrayal I had feared was becoming real, and I could not shake the feeling that my worst nightmare was about to come true. By the time I got home, the sun was just beginning to rise. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Emily, finally. A string of texts came through. "Hey, sorry. I crashed at Jessica's place. I'll be home soon. Are you mad? Babe, please answer me." I stared at her messages, my anger boiling over. She was acting like everything was fine, like I was overreacting for being worried that she had disappeared for the entire night without a single word. I did not respond. Let her wonder where I was for once. When she finally walked through the door later that morning, her eyes were red from crying, and her hair was a mess. She was still wearing that damn black dress. The sight of her standing there looking all disheveled did not fill me with relief or sympathy. It only made me angrier. As soon as Emily stepped into the house, I could feel the tension thick in the air. She stood there, wringing her hands, looking at me like she expected me to comfort her, to tell her everything was fine, that we could move past this. But I was done playing that game. "Where the hell were you, Emily?" I asked, my voice low but cold. She flinched, not used to hearing me speak that way. I told you," she stammered. "I crashed at Jessica's place. We were drinking and I didn't want to drive, so I stayed over. It's no big deal." "No big deal?" She stayed out all night, left me worrying, and now she had the nerve to act like this was nothing? Do you think I'm an idiot? I shot back. "I know you didn't stay at Jessica's. You haven't even talked to her in weeks. So why don't you try again? Where were you?" She stared at me, wide-eyed, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out what to say next, how to spin this so I would believe her. But I had already seen enough. I was drunk, She finally blurted out, stepping closer, her voice trembling. I wasn't thinking straight. It was stupid. Please, let's just talk about it. We can fix this. I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop her from coming any closer. Fix what, Emily? The fact that you lied to me? The fact that you were with someone else all night? Don't play me for a fool. I'm not stupid, and I'm not blind. I saw your messages. Her face went pale. She looked like she had just been punched in the gut. I could almost see the exact moment she realized her excuses were not going to work this time. I didn't sleep with him, she said quickly, the lies spilling from her lips like it was second nature. It wasn't like that. Really? Because I'm pretty sure I watched you walk out of some guy's apartment this morning, I said, my voice rising with every word. I saw the way you smiled at him, the same smile you used to give me. For a moment, she was speechless, her mouth hanging open like she could not believe I had caught her. But then, instead of apologizing, instead of owning up to what she had done, she started crying, big, heaving sobs, like she was the victim in all of this. I didn't mean for it to happen, she choked out between sobs. I was just so upset with everything. With you. You've been so distant, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was confused. Her words made my blood boil. Distant? I had been distant? I was the one who sat here every night, wondering why she was pulling away, trying to figure out how to fix what was going wrong between us. And now she was standing here, twisting everything, making it sound like this was my fault. So, let me get this straight, I said, barely able to contain the rage building inside me. You cheated on me because you were confused? You thought screwing around with some guy was going to fix things between us? Her sobs quieted, and for a moment, I thought she might actually admit it, that she might take responsibility for the first time. But instead, she wiped her eyes, shook her head, and said in the smallest voice, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I want to fix this. I love you. Those words, I love you, cut deeper than anything else she had said. How could she stand there, lying through her teeth, and still have the audacity to tell me she loved me? I shook my head, backing away. Love? You don't even know what that means, Emily. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped away again. Just go, I said, my voice cold. I need space. We're done for now. Her face crumpled as she realized I was serious. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and left, slamming the door behind her. As soon as she was gone, the house fell into a deafening silence. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, trying to process everything that had just happened. The rage, the betrayal, the sadness. It all hit me at once, like a tidal wave crashing down, and I was left standing in the wreckage. I wanted to believe her, to think this was all just some mistake we could move past. But deep down, I knew it was not that simple. This was the beginning of the end. The silence in the house was overwhelming after Emily left. I stood there for what felt like hours, replaying our conversation in my head, dissecting every word she said. Her excuses, her tears, her claim that she loved me. It was all just noise. I had seen the truth in her eyes the moment I called her out. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. The truth was, I had known something was wrong for months. Her behavior had changed. The way she distanced herself, her sudden disinterest in spending time together, the way she snapped at me for the smallest things. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch, that every couple goes through tough times. But now, it was clear. She had been pulling away because she was hiding something. Hiding him. I could not stop thinking about that guy. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was this a one-time thing, or had she been sneaking around with him for months? The more I thought about it, the more questions piled up in my mind, and each one was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But one thing was certain, this was not just a mistake. This was a choice. Emily had chosen to lie to me, to go behind my back, to betray everything we had built together. And now, she expected me to forgive her, to sweep it under the rug like it was just a bump in the road. But how could I? How do you forgive something like that? I glanced at my phone, which had been buzzing every few minutes with messages from her. I had not read any of them, but the notifications piled up on my screen. each one another reminder of the mess my life had just become. Please, Ethan, can we talk? I need to explain. You don't understand. I'm so sorry, babe. Please just answer me. Each message made my stomach turn. I could feel the anger boiling up again. But beneath that anger was something darker. Sadness. It was not just the betrayal that hurt. It was the loss. The loss of trust. The loss of the woman I thought I knew. The loss of the future we had planned together. And now, all of that was slipping away, and I did not know how to stop it. I opened one of her messages, just to see what she had to say. I was drunk, Ethan. I wasn't thinking straight. I never meant for any of this to happen. Can we just talk? Drunk. That was her excuse. As if alcohol somehow made it okay to cheat, to tear apart the life we had built. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table, feeling my pulse quicken. The more she tried to explain it away, the more I realized how little she cared. She was not sorry because she hurt me. She was sorry because she got caught. The minutes dragged on, and with each passing moment, I felt a strange clarity settling in. This was not something I could just forgive and forget. There was no coming back from this. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies or excuses was going to fix it. I stood up, pacing the living room, trying to shake the heavy weight pressing down on my chest. What was I supposed to do now? Was this really the end of us? I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain stop, but all I could do was stand there, feeling powerless in my own home. Then, like a switch had flipped, I knew what I had to do. I could not keep living in this limbo, waiting for her to walk through the door and pretend everything was fine. I had to confront this head-on. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice shaky on the other end. Ethan, thank God. I was so worried. We need to talk. I cut her off, my voice cold. But not here. Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd in an hour. She paused, clearly caught off guard. Okay, I'll be there. I hung up before she could say anything else. I did not want to hear her excuses over the phone. I needed to look her in the eye, to get the truth, and finally, decide where to go from here. As I headed out the door, my heart was pounding in my chest, but there was also a sense of resolve. Whatever happened next, I would not let her manipulate me. I would not let her twist the truth any more than she already had. This time, I was in control. I arrived at the coffee shop early, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. I grabbed a seat in the back corner, far from the other patrons, and ordered a black coffee that I knew I would not drink. My mind was racing, thinking about what I was going to say, how I was going to get the truth out of her. I had to stay calm. I could not let her see how much this was tearing me apart. She had already lied to me enough. I was not going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. A few minutes later, the door chimed, and I looked up to see Emily walking in. She scanned the room, spotted me, and hesitated for a second before heading over. Her eyes were swollen, red from crying, and she looked more fragile than I had ever seen her. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, a far cry from the dress she had worn the night before, but I could not shake the image of her walking out of that guy's apartment. She sat down across from me, nervously pulling at the sleeves of her sweater. Ethan, she began, her voice soft and pleading. I am so sorry. I stayed quiet, staring at her, waiting. I was not going to make this easy for her. I wanted to hear her explanation, but I was not going to let her manipulate me into forgiving her just because she felt guilty. I know I messed up, she continued, her voice trembling. I was so confused, and I felt like you were pulling away from me. I didn't know how to handle it. I clenched my fists under the table, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. So, your solution was to sleep with someone else? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes filled with tears again, and she shook her head quickly. No, I didn't sleep with him. I swear, it wasn't like that. I was drunk and we were talking, and one thing led to another, but I didn't sleep with him. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Do you really think I believe that? I saw the way you looked at him, Emily. I saw you kiss him. She winced, her tears spilling over. I made a mistake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It should never have happened. I never meant to hurt you. Then why did you do it? I shot back. If you knew it was wrong, why did you let it go that far? You could have stopped, but you didn't. You chose to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back. I was lost, she cried, burying her face in her hands. I was scared, Ethan. I was scared we were falling apart, and I didn't know what to do. I stared at her, my chest tight with frustration. How could she still not see it? How could she not understand that this was about more than her fear or confusion? She had broken something that we could never fix, and no amount of apologies would change that. You know what hurts the most? I asked, my voice shaking. It's not even that you cheated. It's that you lied to my face, over and over again, like I wouldn't notice, like I didn't matter. How long has this been going on, Emily? She lifted her head, her tears streaking her face. She hesitated, biting her lip as if the answer was too painful to say out loud. How long? I demanded, my voice rising. A few months, she finally whispered, looking down at the table. It started a few months ago. My stomach dropped. A few months. She had been living a double life for months, coming home to me like nothing was wrong, while she was sneaking around with this guy behind my back. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All the nights I had sat at home, wondering why she seemed so distant, why she never wanted to talk. It all made sense now. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I could not break down now. I needed to stay in control. Do you even care? I asked quietly. Do you even care that you destroyed everything we had? Of course I care, she said, her voice shaking. I love you, Ethan. I want to fix this. I made a mistake, but we can work through it. I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words sink in. You don't fix this, Emily. You don't just move on from something like this. Her face crumpled, and she reached across the table, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. I could not stand to be near her right now. I felt like I did not even know the woman sitting in front of me anymore. I'll do anything, she whispered. I'll cut him off. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Just, please, don't leave me. There it was again. The manipulation, the desperate plea for forgiveness, as if that would undo all the damage she had done. But I was not going to let her pull me back in. We're done, I said, my voice cold and final. I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's nothing left. Emily's face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she was about to collapse. But instead, she nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. I understand, she whispered, her voice broken. She stood up, her shoulders slumped, and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. But as I sat there, alone in the quiet coffee shop, I realized something else. The pain was not over. Not yet. The ride home from the coffee shop felt longer than usual. My mind was numb, replaying every word Emily had said. I kept thinking about how she had sat there, crying, begging for another chance, and yet, all I could feel was emptiness. There was no satisfaction in telling her it was over, no real sense of closure. It just felt hollow. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It felt like a shell of what it used to be. The place where we had once laughed, made plans, and shared our lives together now felt like the aftermath of a storm, with everything scattered and broken. I could not shake the feeling that something had been ripped out of me, leaving behind a gaping wound. I walked inside, the silence pressing in on me. The living room, where we used to cuddle up and watch movies, felt too quiet, too empty. I sat down on the couch, staring at the spot where Emily would sit, and for the first time in hours, the anger started to fade, replaced by something worse, grief. I had told myself that I was ready for this, that I could handle it. But now that it was real, now that she was really gone, all I felt was the weight of everything we had lost. The future we had planned, the memories we had made, all of it seemed pointless now. How could she throw it all away like that? How could she just walk away? I grabbed my phone, half expecting another flood of texts from Emily, but it was quiet. No new messages. No missed calls. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. The hours crawled by, and by the time night fell, the house still felt like a stranger to me. Every corner was a reminder of what we had lost, of what could never be fixed. I went to bed early, but sleep did not come. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, the silence ringing in my ears. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it was Emily, trying again to explain, to beg for another chance. But when I grabbed the phone, it was not her. It was him. The name on the screen sent a jolt of anger through me, Ryan. I hesitated for a moment, wondering what he could possibly want. The last thing I needed was to hear from the guy who had been with my wife. But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered, "What do you want?" I growled, barely able to keep the anger out of my voice. There was a pause on the other end, and then a deep sigh. "Ethan, man, I don't even know where to start. I feel like an idiot for calling, but I just needed to talk to you." My grip tightened on the phone. "Talk to me? About what? You think we need to chat after what you did?" "I didn't know," Ryan said quickly, his voice strained. "I swear to God, man, I didn't know she was married. Emily never told me. I thought she was just in a rough relationship. She said you were distant, that things were bad between you two, but she never mentioned you by name. I didn't even know your name until last week." I felt my stomach twist. Was this true? Had Emily really kept him in the dark about me? "That doesn't make it any better," I snapped, pacing the room. "You still slept with her." "I know," Ryan said, his voice quieter now. "And I'm not calling to make excuses. I wanted you to know that she's been reaching out to me, too. Even after everything, she's still trying to keep me around, like she can't let go of either of us." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean?" "She showed up at my place yesterday," Ryan admitted. "Said she was ready to leave you for good, that she wanted to be with me. But I told her no. I told her I didn't want anything to do with this anymore." I could hardly breathe. Emily had been pleading with me for another chance, but all the while, she was still trying to string him along. She had not changed. She was not sorry. She was playing both sides. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Ryan said. "I was an idiot for getting involved with her, but I'm done. I don't want to be a part of her games anymore, and neither should you. She's toxic, man. She's going to drag both of us down if we let her." I closed my eyes, trying to process everything. Ryan was right. Emily was not going to stop. She was not going to change. She would keep playing her games, manipulating everyone around her until there was nothing left. But I was not going to let her do that to me anymore. "Thanks for telling me," I muttered, hanging up before he could say anything else. As I stood there in the quiet, my mind buzzing with everything I had just heard, I knew what I had to do. This was the end. No more talking, no more chances. I was done being strung along, done being lied to. I picked up my phone and sent Emily one final message. "We're done. I'll be contacting a lawyer. Do not come back to the house." I hit send, blocked her number, and set the phone down. The house was still, the silence heavy, but for the first time, it felt like I had control again. This was the end. The days that followed were a blur of quiet determination. I had already made up my mind. I was going to end this once and for all. I contacted a lawyer the very next day and started the process. I did not care about the logistics or the legal jargon. I just wanted to move on with my life, to cut ties with Emily for good. Emily, though, was not about to go down without a fight. I should have known better. She did not text or call after I sent that final message, but I had this nagging feeling she was not done. I was right. It was late on a Tuesday night when the knock came at the door. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but something inside me knew it was her. I walked to the door slowly, already bracing myself for what was on the other side. And there she was. Emily stood in the doorway, her hair pulled back, eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked smaller somehow, almost fragile, but I knew better. I knew what she was capable of. She held her purse tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded, and when our eyes met, she tried to smile. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I shook my head, leaning against the doorframe, blocking her from coming inside. "No, Emily, we're done. I told you that. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to break down right there on the porch. Please, she whispered, stepping closer. Just hear me out. We can fix this. I love you. You don't have to do this. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to slam the door in her face. She still did not get it. She still thought this was something she could talk her way out of, that her tears would make everything better. But it was too late for that. You don't love me, Emily, I said, my voice cold and flat. You love the control. You love the idea of me. But you can't have us both. You can't play me and him like we're interchangeable. Her eyes widened in shock, and she shook her head furiously. I don't want him. I never did. It was a mistake, Ethan, I swear. I'll leave him for good. Just give me one more chance, and I'll prove it to you. I laughed bitterly, unable to hold it in any longer. You think this is about him? It is not about him, Emily. It's about the lies. It's about the months you spent looking me in the eye and pretending like everything was fine, while you were sneaking around with him behind my back. I didn't know what I was doing, she cried, taking another step closer. I was scared, confused, but I'm not anymore. I know I want to be with you. Just tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. Please, Ethan, don't throw this away. The desperation in her voice made my chest tighten, but I refused to let her pull me back in. You already threw it away, I said, my voice firm. This is over, Emily. You need to leave. Now. Her face crumpled again, and she stared at me for a long moment, like she could not believe what I was saying. Then, something shifted in her expression. The tears stopped, her body straightened, and her eyes narrowed. The fragile, desperate woman standing in front of me vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating side of her I knew all too well. Fine, she said, her voice icy. If this is what you want, then fine. But don't act like you're some saint, Ethan. You have your own problems, and you know it. You're not exactly a prize. I stared at her, stunned for a second by the venom in her words. But then, I realized this was the real Emily, the one who could not stand losing, who would rather tear me down than admit she was the one who had broken us. Get out, I said, my voice low and controlled. Now. She shot me one last glare, grabbed her purse, and stormed off the porch without another word. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a long time, I just stood there, my heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. The silence that followed felt suffocating, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something more. But there was nothing. Just me. Alone. I sat down on the couch, my body heavy with exhaustion. It was really over. She was gone, and for the first time, I was not waiting for her to come back. The weight of the past few months, the lies, the betrayal, the constant tension, lifted, but in its place was something else, something quieter, a kind of sadness that I had not expected. I had fought so hard to get to this point, to free myself from her manipulation, but now that it was done, I felt empty. This was not the victory I thought it would be. I had my freedom, sure, but it did not feel like a win. It felt like a loss. The loss of the life I thought we had. The person I thought she was. I sat there for hours, staring at the empty space where she had stood, wondering how it had all come to this. How had I let it go so far? How had I missed all the signs? I had no answers. Just an empty house and the realization that the person I loved never really existed. The next morning, the house felt eerily calm. There was no Emily, no lies, no tension hanging in the air. Just silence. I had thought that getting rid of her would bring some kind of relief, like a weight lifted off my shoulders, but instead, the emptiness gnawed at me. I moved through the motions, making coffee, flipping through channels on TV, but nothing felt real. It was as if my life had been upended, and now I was living in the wreckage. By noon, I realized I could not stay in the house. Everything in it reminded me of her. The photos on the walls, the dishes we had bought together, even the blankets on the couch. Every corner felt like a reminder of how she had fooled me, of how I had trusted her. I grabbed my keys and decided to get out of there, just to clear my head. I drove aimlessly for a while, not really caring where I was going, just needing to be anywhere but there. The streets were busy, people going about their lives as if nothing was wrong, while mine had just crumbled. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a park. It was a place Emily and I used to go to on weekends, back when things were good. Or at least when I thought they were. I got out of the car and walked along the paths, watching the families and couples enjoying the sunny afternoon. Kids were playing, dogs running, and people laughing. It was such a stark contrast to the storm that had been brewing in my life for months. I envied them, the simplicity of it all. They had no idea how fragile that happiness could be, how quickly everything could fall apart. As I walked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something made me check. It was an email notification, and when I saw the name in the subject line, my heart sank. Emily. There was no message, just a simple subject line. Do not think this is over? I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. What the hell did she mean by that? I thought it was over. I had told her to stay away, to leave me alone. But this felt like a threat, like she was not done with me yet. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and kept walking, but the knot in my chest only tightened. Emily was not going to let go easily. She had always been the type to hold on to control, to dig in her nails until she got what she wanted. And if I knew her like I thought I did, this was her way of telling me that she was not going to go quietly. By the time I got back to the car, my mind was racing with thoughts of what she might do next. Was she planning to fight me in court? Was she going to make this divorce as messy as possible, just to hurt me? I thought I had seen the worst of her, but something told me that the real battle was just beginning. I drove home with a sense of dread sitting heavy in my gut. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the house as I pulled into the driveway. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The quiet was too still, too unnatural. I checked my phone again, half expecting another message from her. But there was nothing, just that one email. I could not get her words out of my head. Do not think this is over. What was she planning? What did she think she had left to hold over me? We were done. I had made that clear. But the thought of her trying to come back, to drag me down with her, made my skin crawl. I called my lawyer the next morning, laying out everything. The messages, the threats, the way Emily had shown up at my house uninvited. He listened quietly, then gave me a calm response. We will handle it, he said. She cannot force her way back into your life. And if she keeps trying, we will make sure the court knows about it. You have to stay calm, Ethan. Do not let her manipulate you. But staying calm was easier said than done. Emily was not just someone who would walk away quietly. She thrived on chaos, on making people dance to her tune. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that she had been manipulating me long before I ever found out about her affair. The months of emotional distance, the fights, the coldness, all of it had been part of her game. That night, I sat alone in the house, staring at the blank TV screen, my thoughts spiraling in every direction. The loneliness was starting to sink in, not just from her absence, but from the realization that everything I thought I knew had been a lie. The life we had built, the love we had shared, it had all been fake. I had been living with a stranger. Another week passed, and the tension only grew. Emily's threats were getting to me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety, expecting to see another message from her. I tried to stay focused, to keep moving forward, but it was like a shadow hanging over me. And then, one night, it happened. I came home from work late, exhausted and ready to collapse on the couch. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. The house felt different. The air felt heavier, like someone had been there. I checked the locks, everything was secure. But as I walked into the living room, I saw it. A small, folded note sitting on the coffee table. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up. It was her handwriting, scrawled in sharp, angry letters. You think you can just walk away from me? You have no idea what I am capable of. This is not over. You will regret leaving me. I crumpled the note in my fist, feeling my entire body tense with anger. She had been in my house. She had let herself in, left this message like some kind of twisted reminder that she was still in control. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the cops, ready to file a restraining order, anything to keep her away. But then, I stopped. No, that was what she wanted. She wanted me to panic, to be afraid, to feel like I had no escape. But I was not going to give her that power. Not anymore. I sat down on the couch, the crumpled note still in my hand, and took a deep breath. Emily was trying to pull me back into her web, but I was done. I would not let her destroy me. I had to stay strong, had to stay focused. This was just her last desperate attempt to keep control. I tossed the note in the trash, grabbed my phone, and called my lawyer again. This ends now, I said firmly. I want to make sure she never steps foot in this house again. The next morning, I woke up feeling more focused than I had in weeks. I knew what needed to be done. Emily had crossed the line by breaking into the house, leaving that note like a warning shot. It was not just about protecting myself anymore. It was about taking back control. She had played her last card, and now I was ready to shut it all down. I met with my lawyer that afternoon. He was calm, as always, but I could tell from the look on his face that he knew this was serious. "We can file a restraining order," he said, flipping through the notes he had taken on my situation. "That will prevent her from coming near you or the house. And if she violates it, she will face legal consequences. You're doing the right thing, Ethan. This will protect you." I nodded, barely hearing his words. My mind was somewhere else, replaying all the things Emily had done. The lies, the manipulation, the game she had played with my emotions. She thought she had me trapped, thought she could keep me dangling on her string. But this was where it ended. That evening, I drove home feeling strangely calm. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a grip on things. The restraining order was in motion. The lawyer had everything under control, and soon, Emily would be out of my life for good. I pulled into the driveway, taking a moment to sit in the car and breathe. The tension in my chest was starting to loosen, and I felt lighter. But as I stepped out of the car and headed toward the front door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, thinking it was just another work email or a reminder, but something made me check. It was Emily. The text was short, but the words sent a chill down my spine. "You'll regret this." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. I had thought we were done, that she had finally given up, but here she was again, trying to pull me back into her twisted world. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to throw the phone against the wall. She was trying to rattle me, to make me second-guess everything I had done to protect myself. But I was not going to give her the satisfaction. I blocked her number, again, and headed inside, locking the door behind me. The house was quiet, but now, instead of feeling peaceful, it felt uneasy, like the silence was waiting to be broken. I knew Emily well enough to know that she was not done. The text was just a taste of what she had planned. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every creak, every rustle outside the window made me sit up, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the restraining order would protect me, but there was a part of me that could not shake the feeling that Emily was going to come back, that she was waiting, biding her time, ready to make her next move. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept busy, throwing myself into work, meeting with the lawyer to finalize the paperwork, doing everything I could to keep my mind off Emily. But the tension never fully went away. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt that familiar jolt of anxiety, even though I knew she was blocked. Every time I came home, I expected to find something, another note, another intrusion into my life. But then, just when I thought maybe I was overreacting, it happened. It was a Friday night, and I had just settled onto the couch with a beer, trying to unwind from a long week. The house was quiet, the TV playing softly in the background, and for the first time in days, I started to relax. And then, the knock came at the door. At first, I thought it was the neighbors, maybe someone needing to borrow something or tell me about some neighborhood event. But the moment I opened the door, I froze. Emily stood there, her face twisted with anger, her eyes wild. She looked nothing like the woman I had fallen in love with. She looked unhinged. "You think you can just get rid of me?" she spat, pushing past me into the house before I could react. "You think you can block me out of your life like I never mattered?" I stood there, stunned, watching her pace around the living room like a caged animal. "Emily, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." She turned to face me, her eyes flashing with rage. You think a stupid piece of paper is going to keep me away from you? You're pathetic, Ethan. You always have been. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. You need to leave. Now. I've already filed for a restraining order. You can't just show up here. Her lips curled into a sneer. Restraining order? You think that scares me? You don't get it, do you? You don't get to just walk away from me. Not after everything we've been through. I took a step back, trying to keep my distance from her. I could see the madness in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she spoke. This was not the Emily I had known. This was someone else, someone dangerous. I'm not going to argue with you, I said, my voice steady but cold. You need to leave, or I'm calling the police. Her face twisted with fury, and she took a step toward me. Go ahead. Call them. You think I care? You think they can stop me? My heart pounded in my chest, but I refused to let her see that she was getting to me. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Emily, this is your last chance, I said, my voice low. Leave. Now. For a moment, she stood there, glaring at me, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. And then, without warning, she lunged toward me, knocking the phone out of my hand. It clattered to the floor as she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You're not going to get away with this, she hissed, her face inches from mine. You think you can just throw me away like trash? You'll regret this, Ethan. I swear to God, you'll regret this. I wrenched my arm free, backing away as quickly as I could. My heart was racing, adrenaline surging through me. I had never seen her like this, so out of control, so furious. I knew I had to get out, had to get help. But before I could make another move, she was gone. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her, leaving me standing there, stunned. I grabbed my phone from the floor, my hands shaking as I dialed the police. I did not care about her threats anymore. I just wanted her out of my life for good. The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing outside as they pulled up to the house. I stood by the window, watching as two officers approached the door. My heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline making my hands shake, but I knew I had done the right thing. Emily was out of control, and this time, there would be consequences. I let them in, explaining what had happened. I told them about the restraining order, the threats, how she had barged into the house and attacked me. The officer who was taking my statement nodded calmly, scribbling down notes as I spoke. We'll find her, he assured me. If she violated the restraining order, she's in serious trouble. The words brought a small sense of relief, but it was overshadowed by the lingering tension in my gut. Emily had gotten away this time, but the way she had looked at me, the madness in her eyes, I knew she would be back. I could feel it. Do you have somewhere you can stay tonight? The other officer asked. It might be safer to leave the house until we track her down. I nodded, knowing that staying here would be a mistake. I packed a bag quickly, grabbing essentials and locking up the house behind me. As I drove away, I could not help but feel like I was leaving more than just a house behind. I was leaving behind the remnants of a life I had once believed in, a life that had been torn apart by lies and manipulation. I stayed with my friend Ryan that night. He knew everything that had happened and did not ask too many questions. He just handed me a beer and sat with me in silence, giving me the space I needed to process it all. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel alone. But that did not mean the fear was gone. The next day, I got a call from the police. They had found Emily. She's been taken into custody, the officer said. We'll be charging her for violating the restraining order and for the assault. You're safe now, Ethan. You did the right thing. Safe. The word felt strange to me. I had not felt safe in a long time. Not since I had found out about the affair. Not since I had seen Emily walk out of that apartment with that man. But maybe, for the first time, there was a real chance for peace. The legal process that followed was swift. With the restraining order in place and the police involved, Emily had no more cards to play. Her manipulations, her lies, they had all caught up with her. The divorce was finalized quickly, and this time, there was no more drama, no more games. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the tension began to lift. The house felt different when I finally returned, quieter but in a good way. It was my space now, free from the weight of her betrayal, free from the chaos she had brought into my life. I unpacked my things, settling back into a routine, but this time, everything felt clearer. I sat down one evening, looking around the living room, and for the first time, the silence felt comforting. There was no more fear, no more waiting for the next storm to hit. It was over, really over. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized something important. Emily had not just betrayed me. She had taught me a hard lesson about trust, about the kind of love I deserved. For months, I had been holding on to the memory of who I thought she was, but now, I could finally see the truth. I had been living in denial, hoping things would go back to how they used to be, but they never could. Not after everything she had done. And in letting go of that hope, I was finally free. The wounds would take time to heal, and I knew that. But as I sat there, in the quiet of my own home, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, a sense of peace. I had survived the storm, and now I could start rebuilding. On my own terms. Emily was gone, but I was still here, stronger, wiser, and ready to move forward.